Happy International Women's Day. Let's talk about some women in history. And with the Ides of March a week from today, who better to start off with than Locusta, the very famous Roman poisoner. Locusta was born in the lands of Gaul, which is now most of modern-day France and Belgium. She was a very prolific poisoner with extensive knowledge of poisonous plants and other substances, and she definitely made her mark upon Roman history. Now, one of the things that Locusta was the most famous for was assisting with the assassination of Emperor Claudius in 54 CE. Now, aside from his rather famous death, Emperor Claudius was not very well known throughout history until he died. Now, as for Locusta, she was actually in jail and set to be executed around the time that this plot was about to be carried out. However, she was freed from prison, pardoned from execution, and employed by Claudius's niece and wife, Agrippina the Younger. Agrippina was notorious for going through husbands like nothing, and Emperor Claudius was next on her list in order to get her son to be the next emperor. So she freed Locusta to help her carry out the plot. Emperor Claudius was noted for being very fond of mushrooms, so Locusta supplied a small amount of poison mushrooms. Sometimes they're claimed to be fly agaric, sometimes death cap mushrooms. Those toxic mushrooms were slipped into the harmless ones throughout the meal, and Emperor Claudius started to feel sick. A physician was called, and they kind of stuck a feather down his throat in order to make him vomit, which was a common practice in those days in case somebody got poisoned. In those days, kind of all you could do in the case of poisons was try to get them to discharge as much as possible and hope that not a whole lot of the poison actually got into the system. However, instead of saving Emperor Claudius's life like intended, the feather was actually coated in poison by Locusta, and that caused him to die quite a lot quicker. It's uncertain what exact poison was on the feather. However, since Locusta had a big fondness for belladonna or deadly nightshade, it likely was belladonna that was used on the feather. Now, after this, Locusta, instead of going free and getting paid, was blamed for the murder of Claudius and sent back to jail. After Claudius's death, Agrippina's son, Emperor Nero, a very famous and reportedly god-awful Roman emperor, was put on the throne. However, all was not well and good. Emperor Nero feared a bunch of his other family members and soon pulled Locusta out of jail again to resume her poisonings. This time, the victims for the poison were his step-brother, Britannicus, his stepfather, Claudius's son. While Nero was in fact Emperor of Rome, Britannicus was Claudius's biological son and still was a threat. So Nero employed Locusta and then poisoned his stepbrother Britannicus and later, allegedly, his own mother Agrippina. Or at least he tried. Apparently there were multiple attempts on Agrippina's life via poisons, but she was a very, very suspicious person, with good reason, so she always had various antidotes on her, so the multiple poisoning attempts did not work. It's unconfirmed whether or not Locusta was involved in the attempted poisonings of Agrippina, but she definitely was in the poisonings of Claudius and Britannicus. Eventually, Emperor Nero succeeded in getting rid of his mother. Allegedly, it's still unconfirmed, but Agrippina was stabbed to death. Now, Nero's reign did not last very long because he was pretty dog shit at being an emperor, so after Nero was removed from ruling Rome, his successor had a lot of people that were loyal to or otherwise employed by Nero executed, including Locusta. So not a very happy ending, But I think that was a very interesting story, and while people may know the story of Agrippina or Nero or Claudius, they don't really know about Locusta, and she definitely does play a very important part in this.